Hello, I'm Ronan Chris Murphy from Ronan's Recording Show and Recording Boot Camp. And last time I did a video where I just gushed about a piece of gear that I've fallen in love with and use all the time. It was the Shure KSM32 Love Story. And I shot that one, or at least the intro, in the canals of Venice, Italy. And today I'm talking about the Designs Ventura, another piece that just I've fallen in love with and is a huge part of all my productions now. I didn't want the Designs Ventura to feel jealous, so we are shooting its intro here in the beautiful Italian Alps. We're going to go back into the studio and I'll run you through some of the parameters and why I love this Designs Ventura so much. Now, if you follow me, you know I have not made a video in a long time. Apologize for that. It's just been kind of bonkers. Been moving the studio. This is my first video in the new studio. Built it in a big cabin in the mountains just north of Los Angeles. And I've been super busy. So working on everything from some video game music, some fairly big albums, some film soundtrack scores, all sorts of stuff. But I want to get back to doing some videos for you guys because I miss doing it. And the first thing I'm going to do is this review here of the Designs Ventura SE. And if that sounds a little familiar, it's because several years ago, I did a review of the earlier version of the Designs Ventura. So why would I go ahead and take the time to do a review of something I kind of already reviewed? The simple answer is I'm kind of stunned that this hasn't become, in the subsequent years, one of the most popular pieces of gear in pro audio. To be blunt, I think this is probably the single most underrated piece of gear in all of pro audio, and truth be told, I think it's one of the best pieces of equipment I have ever used, and I use it all the time in my productions now. So what is this thing? Looks like a mic pre with some other stuff. You're on the right path, but let me back up for a second. I'm a big fan of old Quad 8 stuff. Quad 8 was one of the old American console companies. What I loved about Quad 8 is that they kind of found this perfect balance between really clean and detailed and big and punchy and powerful, and which really makes them great for everything, whether you're doing classical music or acoustic jazz, or you're doing heavy metal, funk, punk, or anything in between. And the company Designs took some of those old Quad 8 designs as their starting point and have built a few pretty awesome pieces of equipment. And the Ventura is no exception. But this isn't really like anything else you've ever used before. And let me explain why. If you look at it, it sort of looks like most preamps, or a lot of preamps that you could see that have a microphone preamp and an EQ. But where this gets a little bit different is this. Here is a discrete instrument level amplifier. So most of the time, if you buy a mic preamp, they've put a 1/4 inch input with a little buffer on it that preps the signal to go over and hit the microphone preamp. This is something totally different. This is a amplifier that is completely optimized for instrument level inputs. It actually doesn't share the amplifier section with the mic preamp at all, completely separate and discrete. The end result of this is they managed to make the most clear, detailed, and punchy direct input source that I have ever used. I've never used anything like it, except of course Designs makes something called the KGB, which is this section in a standalone box. So if you just need that, you might want to save some money and check that out. But again, incredibly detailed, incredibly punchy and clear and articulate. And those are the same kind of descriptors that I would use for the microphone preamp section. This microphone preamp, again, incredibly detailed, so much clarity, but also not wimpy. A lot of times, some of the mic preamps that people like for classical music or audiophile jazz are actually kind of on the boring side. So you get this lack of coloration, but you end up with this, what sounds to me being kind of flat. So again, taking that Quad 8 design one step further, the Ventura manages to be one of the most detailed mic preamps I've ever used that also has a little bit of big rock and roll punch and power to it. And for me, that's kind of perfect as somebody who might be working on chamber music on one session and then heavy metal the next session and then punk or funk or country the next. Having an incredibly flexible mic preamp is really, really good. Does that mean it's always better than every other mic preamp? Absolutely, of course not. So you may just love something like a Daking or a Neve or Helios or any other cool stuff out there for a particular taste, but for punch, clarity, and the ability to actually work awesome on anything, this is really, really cool. The EQ section, it's a 3-band. If you've used a API EQ like the 550As, this will seem a little bit similar. I'm not saying that it actually uses any of the same technology, but this sort of very simple where you've got a limited range of frequency points and being able to only adjust in 2 dB steps could seem a little daunting, especially for people who came up tweaking minutia in the box with plugins. But you learn pretty quick that actually the frequency points on this, which are not the same as something like a Neve or an API, are really well thought out. And when you're doing big, broad sculpting, those 2 dB steps don't really end up being that frustrating. So I can do big sculpting here with this EQ. And then if I need to adjust minutia, I can go in with one of my more flexible hardware or plug-in EQs. But here's where the Ventura gets really kind of neat too, is since the instrument input is separate, the microphone preamp is separate, and the EQ is actually its own separate circuitry. Let me show you the back of this. There's really flexible routing on the back, and you can actually run every section independently. So on the same session at the same time, you could be plugging a bass into the instrument amplifier, recording that out to a DAW track. You could have your lead vocal mic running through the mic preamp and going straight to a DAW or a tape track. And maybe you have a Neve mic preamp that you like, but you want the flavor of this EQ. You can actually take the output of your Neve mic preamp and run it to the input of this EQ with its own independent output and run that separately. So with one 19-inch piece of gear, you can actually be dealing with 3 separate signals simultaneously. So in my own studio, I actually keep this patched in where I have the EQ section and the mic pre section on their own patch points on the patch bay, because a lot of times I'm using just this EQ section in a mix, or I'm combining this EQ with one of my other mic preamps, or if I want to use them both, I actually just will physically patch them. I can patch any way I want on the board. So really, really super flexible and useful. And I do a lot of consulting with people, helping them design studios or put studios together. And this has sort of become one of the most common things that I recommend, because if you've got this and a really flexible compressor, say something like the Empirical Labs Distressor, you're covered. There's pretty much almost nothing that you're going to run into for a single channel that you can't record extremely well. Add a few good mics to this, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing electric guitars, violins, voices, lead, background, snare drums, or anything, any single channel of tracking, you pretty much have all the basses you would ever need. Of course, we all love lots of different flavors. We might want to go and use different flavors that aren't this, but for putting together a studio for one piece of gear in a 19-inch rack and maybe add a compressor to it, this is on par with the high end of virtually any other company that you're going to try gear from. You may choose to like one better than the other, but with something like this, you have an absolute no compromise option to record pretty much anything that's going to get put in front of you. So a couple last little things from the place I like to stay at here up in the Italian Alps is, obviously there's the question, what's the difference between the Ventura and the Ventura SE? Some small changes on the back, but from what I understand from the guys that make the Ventura is they basically reconfigured how they manufacture, and in their words, they tweaked it to make it more bulletproof. So I've used the old one, I've used the new one, and sonically I don't hear a difference, so I think you're good with whichever one you get. And they don't sell the old ones anymore, so you can just get the Ventura SE new on the market. And of course, the best way to see if this piece of gear, a mic pre, an EQ, direct recording input is right for you, is to get your own paws on it and tweak it and have some fun, make some music and see if it works for you. But if you can't do that, check out this next video coming up where I run you through some different EQ settings and a few things I recorded with the mic pre and the direct input. YouTube is not the best way to hear if you dig the sound of something, but hopefully it'll give you a rough idea and get you to figure out whether or not it's worth going and checking out this piece of gear yourself. So check out this next video if you want to hear the sound samples, and ciao from Italy, and yeah, keep having fun with this stuff and stay focused on the music.